When Congress collapses into chaos, one voice cuts through the noise, and it's Jasmine Crockett.
On that side is why this has been the most unproductive Congress. People all over X and everything is like, well, they don't deserve anything. They're so unproductive. Let me tell you, the people that y'all keep putting in charge are the reason that we are unproductive, because they don't understand how to govern. And honestly, they don't even have a will to govern. And the fact that they are allowing somebody who basically is a shadow president to come out and tell them what to do, including Donald Trump, because listen, we know that Elon, as they have touted about how they need to get rid of the immigrants, let me be clear, Elon cannot become president of the United States because he is an immigrant.
Within less than 2 years, the 118th Congress has been rated as the least productive Congress since World War II. According to the Brookings Institution, only 37 bills were signed into law in 2024, a drop of more than 60% compared to the previous session. Even more alarming, over 118 bipartisan bills were blocked by far-right House Republicans, most of them influenced by Donald Trump and the MAGA-aligned caucus. Crockett doesn't just call these Republican leaders incompetent. She highlights that they are actively allowing Donald Trump, a man holding no elected position, to operate as a shadow president. She draws a parallel between this and allowing a figure like Elon Musk, a wealthy immigrant oligarch, to influence public policy through Twitter and his proximity to Trump, calling it a dangerous form of anti-democratic manipulation.
Listen, I am definitely of the opinion, that we should have some DEI hires in this administration. You know, the ones that definitely earned it, because clearly we've got a bunch of incompetent fools that are trying to run our country, and actually they are running our country. They're running it straight into the ground.
And numbers don't lie. According to Bloomberg Economics, U.S. GDP shrank by 1.5% in Q1 2025, marking the first back-to-back quarterly contraction since the pandemic era. Unemployment rose to 4.6% and consumer confidence dropped to 80. 5 points, the lowest in over 11 years, based on data from the Conference Board. Core inflation also rose again, partly due to the 25% tariffs imposed on cars and goods imported from Canada and Mexico, a policy pushed by Trump and backed by GOP leadership. Even worse, Congress has failed to pass any significant relief plan to address the border crisis or rising gas prices, despite a $118 billion border funding bill having already cleared the Senate with bipartisan support. According to the Congressional Budget Office, DBO, if enacted, that border package could reduce illegal immigration by up to 41% within 18 months. Yet House Republicans rejected it just hours after it passed the Senate.
I know that Rudy Giuliani has lost everything, from his law license to his money to his dignity. Heck, he was even losing his hair dye, okay? Like, he has lost everything along with any other lawyer that's ever associated with him. And so now we get to J.D. Vance when he picks a VP running mate. And he also picked another loser, right? Like, because now the single cat ladies are coming for their ticket. Like, I mean,
if there's one symbol of irresponsible governance, it's Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor and Trump's personal attorney, who has now lost his law license, faces federal financial investigations, and has been publicly disowned by Trump's own legal circle. Jasmine emphasized that Giuliani is not an exception. He's just one of many failed allies Trump handpicked, from Steve Bannon to Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell to Peter Navarro, most of whom are now indicted, convicted, or discredited. The truth is, both parties in the Senate reached consensus, but a small faction in the House has sabotaged the entire process. Crockett calls this what it is: deliberate paralysis of the American government for political theater. And she raises the question that millions of Americans are now asking: if you're not here to work, why are you even here? While gas prices in California have surpassed $5.25 per gallon, millions of Americans have lost SNAP online Medicaid benefits, and the threat of winter blackouts looms over New York and Michigan due to reduced Canadian energy imports. Congress remains gridlocked by the very people claiming to defend patriotism. In the end, Crockett isn't speaking out for points. She's speaking out because this is directly affecting the livelihoods of millions of families. And as Americans see bills climbing and their representatives staying silent, voices like Jasmine Crockett's are among the few still preserving public trust. But the real question is, how long can one voice hold the line when the entire system is crumbling? Keep your eyes on the screen. This is only the first spark in a firestorm.
No rush. I think that we will make a deal with China. I think we've had some very good talks. I have a very good relationship with President Xi, and I think it's going to continue.
A shocker in the world of global trade. The United States and China are at it again, sparring in an unprecedented duel of tariffs and retaliations, a brewing power struggle, or the dawn of new cooperation. As of today's date, talks are reportedly in progress, but tension simmers below the surface on what could be the dawn of a new economic order. Donald Trump, a figure polarizing as ever, has confirmed that discussions with China are underway regarding a colossal tariff increase. Just when it seemed the trade war couldn't intensify any further, Trump upped the ante with a jaw-dropping tariff increase to 145%. This move came after Beijing's retaliatory measures following Trump's sweeping Liberation Day trade actions, a chess game of epic proportions. Trump revealed, "We're talking, and we'll see what happens. But I can tell you they want to make a deal." Bold words that captured the essence of ongoing yet very preliminary discussions. Let's take a step back and see how we got here. Over recent years, the trade relationship between the U.S. and China has been anything but stable. With the backdrop of escalating disputes, every decision now holds the potential to tip the scales toward either resolution or chaos. When Trump increased tariffs to an eye-watering 145%, it wasn't just a policy maneuver. It was a declaration that rippled across both oceans and stock markets. China's immediate retaliation was just as forceful, a digital line drawn in the sand. What sparked these firebrand decisions? It was Trump's Liberation Day trade actions, sweeping measures that aimed to reset the stage of international commerce in America's favor, but prompted an assertive pushback from China. Now, with this tariff standoff at its peak, various key points emerged. First, Trump's announcement confirms that despite heated tensions, communication channels with Beijing remain open. The presence of dialogue suggests a willingness, perhaps even desperation, on both sides to find a compromise. Trump's remarks, "We're talking and we'll see what happens," hint at a strategic pause in their hardline stances, a mutual recognition of the stakes involved. As they trade tariff blows, the world watches, holding its breath. Second, the scale of these tariffs is unprecedented. By hiking tariffs to 145%, the United States has undertaken a risky gamble. It reflects a broader strategy, not just of flexing economic muscles, but of recalibrating global trade practices. This escalation underscores a radical shift, moving beyond traditional diplomacy into the realm of high-stakes economic brinkmanship. And yet, Trump insists the talks are very preliminary, suggesting the potential for these tariffs to either pave a way to peace or descend into further discord. The implications of this trade conflict are profound. Supporters of Trump's hardline approach argue it's necessary to rectify long-standing trade imbalances, portraying this struggle as a fight for fairer trade. Critics, however, warn of dire economic consequences, fearing that amplified tariffs could spark inflation, damage domestic industries' tools, and worsen relations with a crucial trading partner. Could this escalation end up hurting the very economy it intends to protect? As these preliminary discussions unfold, both nations stand at a crossroads. Will they forge a path towards reconciliation or tumble deeper into economic skirmish? The stakes have never been higher, and the world waits in bated anticipation for the next move in this geopolitical chess game. In the midst of this negotiation drama, the questions remain. Will these talks lead to a cooling of tensions or ignite new fires on the global stage? Will it be an opportunity seized or a danger crystallized? The implications stretch far beyond the immediate economic impacts, potentially shaping the future landscape of international relationships. The final outcome depends on the continued, albeit tentative, dialogue between these two superpowers and their willingness to find common ground. It's a suspenseful narrative of ambition, power, and the age-old dance of diplomacy. What do you think? Will these talks lead to a breakthrough or fuel further discord? By 2025, the last frontier may become the first victim in a new North American trade war. Alaska, America's cold, rugged, and remote northernmost state, is staring down a crisis that could isolate it both economically and logistically from the rest of the United States. In 2025, as U.S Canada trade tensions escalate, British Columbia is threatening to impose new tolls and infrastructure fees. USS. Trucks traveling through Canada to Alaska, a move that could critically disrupt the only land route to the state and paralyze supply chains. Unlike the lower 48 states, Alaska shares no land border with any U.S. state. Every truck, shipment, or delivery from the continental U.S. must pass through Canada, specifically the Alaska Highway, which cuts across British Columbia and the Yukon. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, over 3.4 million tons of cargo valued at nearly $3 were shipped along this corridor in 2024, a 7% increase from 2023 driven by rising fuel and maintenance costs. This logistical choke point has become a bargaining chip in a renewed economic standoff. In early 2025, the Trump administration reimposed 25% tariffs on Canadian exports, including automobiles, aluminum, and agricultural goods. In response, British Columbia proposed tolls and infrastructure fees on U.S. freight entering Alaska, testing the boundaries of a 1977 treaty that prohibits tolls on the Alaska Highway. But BC argues that new infrastructure, such as bypasses, bridges, or way stations, falls outside the treaty's scope. If implemented, these fees could range from $2,500 to $4,200 per truck, depending on cargo weight and route length. Transportation firms like Carlisle Transportation and Linden Inc. warn that this could raise overall freight costs by 20 to 35%, with the financial burden passed directly to Alaskan consumers. Alaska already ranks as the most expensive state to live in the U.S., with consumer prices averaging 31% higher than the national mean, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, February 2025. Gasoline prices in Anchorage hit $6.15 per gallon, almost double the national average. Disrupting or tolling the main supply corridor could cause food prices to rise by 12 to 18% within 2 months, and critical regions like Hyder, Haines, and Skagway, which rely entirely on cross-border access, could experience food and fuel shortages within 14 days of interruption. Beyond the highways, Canada is also signaling potential restrictions or environmental surcharges on inside passage routes, coastal waterways essential to Alaska's summer cruise season and marine shipping. In 2024, Alaska welcomed 1.46 million cruise passengers, generating $2.5 billion in economic activity, according to the Alaska Travel Industry Association. If cruise lines like Princess Cruises or Norwegian face rising Canadian port or environmental fees, ports like Juneau, Sitka, and Ketchikan may see mass cancellations, devastating local economies. Airspace isn't immune either. Over 35 commercial flights per day from mainland U.S. to Alaska cross Canadian skies. Should Canada suspend overflight rights, airlines like Alaska Airlines will be forced to reroute through the Arctic or Pacific, raising fuel costs 25 to 40% and delaying cargo and passenger service. In response to British Columbia's toll threats, Senator Dan Sullivan, R. Alaska, has renewed his push to repeal the Passenger Vessel Services Act, a 135-year-old law requiring cruise ships to stop at a foreign port before visiting 2 U.S. ports. Removing this rule would allow ships to sail directly from Seattle to Alaska, bypassing Vancouver and Victoria, and potentially diverting hundreds of millions in tourism revenue away from Canada. Alaska officials have also warned they may ban U.S. cruise ships from stopping at Canadian ports if British Columbia imposes new transit fees. This tit-for-tat escalation could spark a regional tourism war, with British Columbia's $3 billion cruise economy caught directly in the crossfire. More than an economic dispute, this is becoming a national security concern. Alaska houses critical U.S. military assets, including Eielson Air Force Base, Fort Greely Missile Defense, and several strategic Arctic monitoring installations. Disruption to Alaska's logistics could jeopardize the U.S. as Arctic defense posture, especially amid increased Russian and Chinese military interest in the region. Alaska, once considered remote and out of the way, is now at the heart of a geopolitical tug-of-war. With Canada exploiting its geographic leverage and the U.S. struggling to respond without escalating the crisis, this isolated state has become a test case for how vulnerable America's supply chains and defense strategies really are. As this standoff continues to unfold, the real question isn't just about tolls or tariffs, but whether the U.S. can truly afford to lose control of its northernmost lifeline.
We'll have to increase tariffs on China even more.
Can't imagine it. No, I can't imagine. I don't think so. I don't think I'll have to do it. And I think he's going to want to get to a deal.
Shockwaves are tearing through the global economy. As of April 2025, the U.S.-China trade war has exploded into a full-scale tariff frenzy, unleashing chaos across stock markets, corporate boardrooms, and kitchen tables worldwide. Will this spiraling economic showdown reshape the balance of power? Or is the world stumbling toward an unprecedented trade meltdown with no end in sight? Welcome to the most critical economic battle of our generation. At the center, 2 superpowers locked in a ruthless cycle of escalation. It's supporters versus critics, opportunity versus danger, and the stakes couldn't be higher. On April 10, 2025, President Donald Trump made a stunning move. With the world watching, Trump suspended the controversial country-specific reciprocal tariff for all nations except China for a temporary 90-day period, until July 8, 2025. A baseline 10% tariff stayed in place for other countries, but for China, the gloves came off. That same day, Trump's administration hiked the U.S. reciprocal tariff on Chinese goods to a staggering 125%. But the story didn't start there. The days leading up to Trump's announcement saw a vicious tit-for-tat. On April 4th, China slapped a 34% tariff on all imported U.S. goods. The White House fired back. President Trump raised tariffs on Chinese goods to a punishing 84% effective rate as of April 9th. China matched, imposing its own 84% tariff rate by April 10th. But Trump wasn't finished. Just hours later, he escalated again, raising tariffs to an effective rate soaring above 145%. By April 11th and beyond, Beijing responded in kind, with retaliatory tariffs reaching as high as 125%. As tariff after tariff thundered across the Pacific, some industries felt the shock more deeply than others. Electronics, key to both American and Chinese consumers, were briefly spared. On April 11th, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection issued guidance temporarily exempting smartphones and laptops from the newest reciprocal tariffs. This was a short-lived reprieve. The Commerce Department swiftly launched a Section 232 investigation into semiconductors and downstream electronics, covering everything from microchips to consumer devices. The report from this investigation is due in 180 days, and the specter of new import restrictions looms large. Other products found no such escape. U.S. tariffs on Chinese lithium-ion EV batteries now total a crushing 173.4%. Even as some items avoided immediate hikes, most imports already in transit arriving before May 27th remain exempt. But this is merely a delay, not a reprieve. So who's feeling the pain? For businesses, the cost of uncertainty and rising tariffs is mounting fast. Analysts estimate that even with Trump's partial 90-day tariff pause, the average U.S. tariff rate will skyrocket from 2% to 24% by the summer. The real shock came on April 9th, when the relentless escalation triggered a massive market crash. But the very next day, after Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and others warned of dire economic consequences, President Trump paused most new reciprocal tariffs above 10%, except for those targeting China. The markets breathed a sigh of relief. The S&P 500 surged an astonishing 9.52% immediately after Trump's announcement, signaling that even temporary stability can calm the financial storm. There are notable exceptions to the U.S. tariff onslaught. As of April 10th, 6 countries, Belarus, Canada, Cuba, Mexico, North Korea, and Russia, remain exempted from the new reciprocal tariffs. According to administration sources, these countries either already face steep tariffs or are subject to existing sanctions that drastically limit their trade volume with the United States. Yet, amidst the chaos, U.S. policymakers remain deeply divided. Supporters of Trump's aggressive stance celebrate the crackdown as a long-overdue correction. They argue the tariffs level the playing field and confront China's trade practices head-on. Critics counter with dire warnings: a global recession, rising costs for American families, and increased isolation from vital supply chains. From Beijing, the rhetoric has reached a fever pitch. In a clear rebuke, China's Commerce Ministry declared, even if the U.S. continues to impose higher tariffs, it will no longer make economic sense and will become a joke in the history of world economy. The message could not be clearer. Neither side intends to blink first. Where does this power struggle lead? With reciprocal blows landing harder each round, a fragile global economy teeters on the edge. Will the U.S.-China trade war trigger a new world order, devastate Main Street, or fizzle out as political theater? The countdown is on. July 8, 2025 is just weeks away, and the world is watching. What's your verdict? Bold leadership shaking up global trade, or reckless brinkmanship risking the future? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more breaking analysis on the stories that move our world.